in profound thanksgiving, we come to this house of God, to a place of prayer, to a church where remembrance and hope are sacred duties. Here, where Queen Elizabeth was married and crowned, we gather from across the nation, from the Commonwealth, and from the nations of the world, to mourn our loss, to remember her long life of selfless service, and in sure confidence to commit her to the mercy of God, our Maker and Redeemer. With gratitude, we remember her unswerving commitment to a high calling over so many years as Queen and head of the Commonwealth. With admiration, we recall her lifelong sense of duty and dedication to her people.
Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself.
Her late Majesty famously declared on a 21st birthday broadcast that her whole life would be dedicated to serving the nation and Commonwealth. Rarely has such a promise been so well kept. Few leaders receive the outpouring of love that we have seen.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel, live at Buckingham Palace, where hours ago the late Queen passed for one final time during an awe-inspiring send-off worthy of this nation's greatest ever monarch. After returning to the site of her wedding and coronation, Westminster Abbey, for a grand state funeral attended by the great and the good of the world, and making a last trip home to Windsor Castle for an emotional committal service, Queen Elizabeth the Great, one of the most prominent women in history, was permitted a private final goodbye. Surrounded only by the King and her closest family members, she is tonight being reunited with her sister, her father, the Queen Mother, and her darling Prince Philip at a private burial at the King George VI Memorial Chapel. I look back at one of the most poignant days in our nation's history in my digest next, before welcoming my superstar panel to share their thoughts tonight. I'm joined by the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, Associate Editor for the Daily Telegraph Christopher Hope, and political commentator Belinda DeLucy. My royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, will be back to analyse the day at 9:20, as will our US royal commentator Kinsey Schofield. She's live at 10:45. Plus, veteran broadcaster Dame Jenny Murray pays tribute to the late Her Majesty as the ultimate feminist at 9:35. It was a devastating day all round for the royal family, including the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, but tensions appeared to bubble to the surface regardless. So, with Prince Harry seeming reluctant to sing God Save the King amid public rows over his military uniform and the late notification of his grandmother's death, has the royal truce already fractured? Well, royal biographer Tom Bower will be live with us to weigh in on this at 9:25, before royal commentator Angela Levin gives her take at 10:25. Plus, as Nicola Sturgeon joins world leaders at the Queen's state funeral, has Her late Majesty succeeded in uniting the kingdom in death? Neil Oliver here on that at 9:50. This is GB News, live on the day we bid a final farewell to Elizabeth II. Now, today was filled with many unforgettable images as Britain and the world watched Her late Majesty the Queen laid to rest. And among the most enduring, the sight of 9-year-old Prince George, an expected future king, of course, and his sister Princess Charlotte, bidding farewell to their great-grandmother. That even this young generation of the royal family remains stoic throughout the Westminster Abbey state funeral and the committal service at Windsor is a testament to the Queen and her dedication to duty. But what might have been going on behind those expressions of fortitude? Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by the royal biographer and commentator Angela Levin to give her insight. Angela, look, on a day of so many poignant images that I think we'll never forget, certainly one that will stick in my mind is of the young Prince George and his younger sister, Princess Charlotte, saying goodbye to their great-grandmother.
Yes, I thought it was incredibly moving. And actually, it's right, because you do feel that the royal family is safer because you've got the heirs and the heirs and the heirs going through. And I thought they were marvellous, those two young kids. And thanks to their parents, that they've been brought up to be really disciplined, because I think children start fidgeting and they get bored with this music and people making speeches, but they didn't. They were wonderful. And I thought it was charming to see Charlotte in a grown-up hat. She looked terrific, and she also had her posture that was absolutely right. And she had on her coat a little horseshoe, tiny, which had diamonds in, I discovered later, which the Queen had given her. And she loves horses too, so she wore that in memory of her great-grandmother, which I thought was incredibly touching. I thought it also helped George, because he's quite shy and she's quite a forceful young girl, knows her own mind very much. And for the two of them to be together like that, they could really help each other. And in a way, it could be like Princess Anne and King Charles, that you've got someone very close to you who you trust. But what was very charming about George was that when he came into the cathedral, usually he holds his father's hand. Often Charlotte doesn't, because she's not quite like that. But he walked on his own in front of his mother, rather like his father would do, because he's the next in line. He didn't hold hands, and she refused to as well. Charlotte had her hands in front. So this is, if I'm in a grown-up situation, I'm going to be a grown-up. And I thought it was very touching. But of course, after the ceremony in the cathedral, she burst into tears. So she'd been holding all that sort of pain and sadness in her to be a grown-up girl. And then when she was out in the open, she could have a cry, and her mother put her arm around her, and I thought maybe the two of them won't want to come to Windsor, because it's a lot to expect from young children to sit quietly yet again, same old really. But they were immaculate. They're absolutely immaculate. But I don't know about them, but when Her Majesty went down in her coffin, I mean, I cried. I thought it was somehow, we're losing you now, you're going, and we can't do anything about it. But they were very, very strong-minded. Yeah. I thought they were wonderful.
It all feels real now, Angela. There's a real sense of emptiness out there tonight, because Buckingham Palace is no longer the Queen's home. Prince Charles hasn't moved in yet. It's certainly going to be a really difficult few months, I think, for us to get our head around this. But Angela Levin, the royal biographer, you're going to be with us all night here live at Buckingham Palace, so thank you so much, Angela. And of course, we are here advertisement free until 11 p.m. as we finish our tribute to our beloved late Queen Elizabeth II, who was today laid to rest, to round up what has been a historic day. Rhiannon Jones with the news. Perfectly.
A state funeral has been held for Queen Elizabeth II. Tens of thousands lined the streets to pay their final respects. A Royal Navy gun carriage carried Her Majesty's coffin in a military procession from Westminster Hall to Westminster Abbey. On top sat the imperial state crown, along with a wreath of flowers and a card that read, "In loving and devoted memory, Charles R." The King and the Queen Consort led the procession, followed by the Prince and Princess of Wales and the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. A 2-minute silence was held across the nation. Tens of thousands more lined the route as the Queen's coffin was taken from London to Windsor Castle. The state hearse covered in flowers thrown by mourners for her final journey up the Long Walk. Her favourite horse and 2 of her beloved corgis there as the procession passed through the castle. Mourners there spoke to GBNews about why they'd decided to come and pay their respects.
She has been that continuous point throughout my service, 22 years in the Engineers. We all swore an oath of allegiance to her, and that lasts forever. We only swore an oath of allegiance to one person. She swore an oath of allegiance to nations, and she has done a far, far better job of upholding that oath than I could ever hope to do.
We were all like one big family for the Queen, and it was really sweet of everyone to come together and to have, like, just to be all together as a community and to see this together.
A private burial service held for the Queen tonight marks an end of national mourning for Her Majesty. Her final resting place is next to her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, at King George VI Memorial Chapel. The Queen's burial follows a committal service at St George's Chapel within the walls of Windsor Castle. During the service, Her Majesty's imperial state crown was removed from her coffin for the final time. It ended with "God Save the King" and the Queen's piper with one last lament for Her Majesty. This is GB News. Back now to Dan Wootton.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
That was Queen Elizabeth the Great 74 years ago. We know now her life was long and it was unparalleled in terms of public service. She kept to that pledge every single day of her remarkable, extraordinary and historic 7-decade reign. And today we did our best as a nation to honour her unwavering commitment to us.
strengtheneth thee. In communion with the blessed saints.
What's so uplifting is that through these past 12 days of deep sadness and grief, the late Her Majesty was able to bring us together again. 6 years of bitter political divisions have been put to one side, albeit probably only temporarily, for us to celebrate what it means to be British and how proud we are of the institutions and traditions that make the United Kingdom truly great. It's been a reminder of the importance of our union, our Commonwealth and our royal family as the glue that holds the Westminster system of democracy together. The late Queen crystallised a spirit of togetherness and I believe has sparked our desire to fight back against the constant drumbeat from the usual suspects that we should somehow feel ashamed of our Britishness and unrivalled history. How else can you explain the great Elizabeth line that saw hundreds and thousands of total strangers come together for 14-hour pilgrimages around the sites of our capital city to view the late Queen's coffin lying in state? And how else can you explain the desire for leaders from virtually every country in the world to be transported by minibus to Westminster Abbey to pay tribute to our Queen? Perhaps most importantly, Elizabeth II has, against all odds, given the British monarchy a fighting chance to survive for another century, with the transition to King Charles III this past week being pitch perfect. There are challenges ahead, of course, and we will continue to discuss them. But the country has united behind the Windsors this week because we know it was what the Queen would have wanted. Today, while devastating and sad and emotional on so many levels, today was also a triumph for British governance, British organisation and British tradition. With the eyes of the world on the UK, we said goodbye to our beloved late Queen in a way that truly did her justice. We are proud of her and proud of our great country and more united than we have been in many years. To respond now, my superstar panel, the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, Associate Editor at the Daily Telegraph Christopher Hope, and the former MEP Belinda de Lucy. But just before I come to you, breaking in the past few minutes, the Queen has now been buried alongside her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, at the King George VI Memorial Chapel in Windsor Castle. The royal family has confirmed. The private family service began at 7:30 p.m. and was conducted by the Dean of Windsor. So Carol Malone, she's gone now.
Yeah, you say she's gone, but she hasn't for most of it. You know, what we witnessed today, Dan, was spectacular. It was magisterial, it was unprecedented, and it was utterly, utterly beautiful. No other country in the world could have put on that show, that kind of show. And it wasn't just the people around her that put on the show. The Queen did. She was heavily involved in the planning of her funeral because she didn't just want it to be about her. She wanted it to be about the monarchy, tradition, the military valour. She wanted tradition and the monarchy to endure, and she wanted her funeral to show us why it did. And it did all of that and more. And as you said in the intro there, you know, she united us in life, but somehow we are now more united with her death. And you know, all the people who seek to put the union asunder can go hang now. It's not going to happen. It has set their course back decades. The Republicans can also go hang. We're not interested in listening what they have to say now, because me, along with millions of other people today, I was gut-wrenchingly proud to be British and proud of her and everything she stands for. And all the people in that abbey, all the people around, all the dignitaries, the princes, the presidents, the sultans who came to say goodbye, they wanted to be there because they wanted to be in the presence of greatness. The kind of greatness they will never, ever achieve. But they just wanted to be there, not only to pay their respects, but maybe to learn from someone who has strode this world for 70 years like a colossus and covered 1 million miles down in her time on the throne, and has made not just patriots of us here in Britain, she has made patriots all over the world.
Indeed, and speaking of great patriots, Belinda de Lucy, I've been fascinated by your journey over the past few days. You lined up in the great Elizabeth line, as I'm calling it, the queue to end all queues. But then last night, Belinda, I believe you camped out on the Mall so you could be there to see the Queen's final journey. Tell me about it, Belinda.
Well, I felt very lucky to be able to, living in London, and I mean, I wish I'd remembered to bring a chair or a sleeping bag because it's a little chilly. But you're not there to, you know, think about yourself the whole time, every minute that I was there. We're sharing stories with strangers. We're bonding over moments we've all had in our lives where we've been touched by the Queen. You know, I met a lady who had gotten the train down at 9 o'clock at night on the lying in state walk that I did on the Elizabeth line, and she said, I was lying in the bath at 9 p.m. and I just had an urge to be as close as I could to our Queen before she was buried. And so she got on the last train down from Doncaster to London with her 12-year-old and started queuing at 1 a.m. with me, and she got the train back up to Doncaster as soon as she was off the train, had finished her lying in state visit. It was unbelievable, the journeys people had made and how much grieving people did through the queue, as if it was a cathartic experience. People needed to grieve and spend hours doing something because we're all at 6s and 7s and a bit lost at sea. We need to do something to say to Her Majesty, thank you for your service. So all the queuing and hours on the cold concrete floor were an honour just to be able to express thanks to our late Queen.
And Christopher Hope, you had a front row seat to witness this historic moment this morning as well.
That's right, Dan. I do work for the Telegraph in my day job, and I was very lucky enough to be facing the great West Door, watching all the guests arrive, the congregation arrive. It was extraordinary. And around the corner, literally, as, you know, a few feet from me, became the Queen's coffin, draped in the Standard, hauled by those amazing ratings, carried by those amazing servicemen. I mean, you know, it's such on my job is always a privilege, but to see the movement and the choreographed way that the servicemen moved around that coffin and dealt with it, it was just unbelievable. I think for me, the most moving part of the day, I think it was showing there a video I took with my camera phone, my old camera, from the actual platform where I was standing to show you how close I was to what was going on. Quite extraordinary. For me, though, the big emotional gut punch, I think, was when in that service, in a committal service in Windsor this afternoon, when the crown and the orb and the sceptre were removed from the Queen's coffin and placed on the altar, and she goes back into the ground in the way she appeared as Elizabeth Windsor, without all of the things we gather through life, the value, the wealth, and for her, in her case, it's the orb, the sceptre, and the crown. All that goes away, and you go back to meet your Maker as you came into the world, and that is a really great lesson for us all, really, I think, to take away from today.
The Daily Telegraph's Christopher Hope, the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, and the political commentator Belinda de Lucy, my superstar panel on this very special night, and they will be with us throughout the night as we continue our coverage of the remarkable life of Her late Majesty the Queen. Now, as Chris just mentioned, in one of the most moving moments of an incredibly emotional day, the nation was gifted one final glimpse of Her late Majesty the Queen's coffin during her committal service at St George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. One by one, the sovereign sceptre, orb, and finally the imperial state crown were taken from atop the coffin of Britain's greatest ever monarch, effectively symbolising the end of the second glorious Elizabethan age. In a demonstration of our monarchy's seamless continuity, the Deans of Windsor laid the instruments of state on the chapel's altar, ready to be used next year in King Charles's coronation. Well, joining me now to react to this historic day, as they have done for the past 12 days, my royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier. Well, we've been on quite a journey, haven't we, the past 12 days, Lady C? What a day. What a day.
I mean, it's been so moving, but I'll tell you what I think it's told the world is that we are Great Britain because we have a great monarchy. I think without the Queen and without our monarchy, we would just be ordinary Britain. I mean, what has taken place today is the most prestigious event that has taken place in the whole history of humanity. Had we had a president, no matter how popular, none of this would have happened. We are very fortunate to not only have a monarchy, but to have had a monarch and have the present monarch, King Charles III, who will function within the tradition of the late Queen, that we, look at what she has given us. She gave us 70 years of absolute devotion and an example to the world of what a true head of state should be about. Above politics, above pettiness, really an exemplar of all that is good and true in a civilized world. That, I mean, to me, is really the legacy of the Queen. And I think she has handed on the baton to King Charles III, who I have to tell you, I think has grasped it very ably and I think will continue in the same vein.
Well, let's hope he does. Phil Dampier, your reflections on today.
Yeah, good evening, Dan. As Lady C says, it was the greatest show on earth, wasn't it? Those world leaders flooded in, and she's absolutely right that we should be proud of the monarchy. But funnily enough, I enjoyed more the more human moments at Windsor. I thought it was a more intimate affair, and those touches when people saw the corgis bereft of having their owner and the Queen's favourite horse, things like that, I think really were tearjerkers, and they certainly got to me. And I was thinking about the Queen and her legacy of compassion, of tolerance and forgiveness, themes that sort of ran throughout her life. And I was looking at the people in the congregation at St George's Chapel. You had Earl Spencer, William and Harry's uncle, Diana's brother, of course, who launched that tirade against the royal family during his eulogy at Princess Diana's funeral. You had Fergie, when you think Sarah Ferguson, Prince Andrew's ex-wife, when you think of all the scandals she's been involved in over the years. And of course, we won't go into Harry and Meghan. We all know about them and time will tell what happens there. But they were all brought together. They were all there for the Queen, and it showed that she virtually had no enemies.
She's a great unifier, Lady C.
She had a very good memory, and she never forgot people who were down on their luck. I saw Crown Prince Alexander of Yugoslavia there with his wife. He was a godson of hers. He never ever reigned. I saw the Bulgarians. I saw the Greeks. There was Crown Prince Pavlos of Greece, his wife, Crown Princess Chantal, and there was also his mother, Queen Anne-Marie. The Queen never ever sidelined or marginalized people who were down on their luck. Whoever you were, whether you were the greatest or the humblest, she really spoke to everybody and treated everybody as if they were the same. And I think the congregation showed it, and also the onlookers showed it, because I don't know if you listened to some of the interviews with people who were just looking at it. And I mean, black, white, brown, all different races, all different religions, all different ages. Everybody came together and understood that we were very fortunate to have a woman who was a true example of what it is to be a truly wonderful human being.
Phil Dampier, obviously the royal mourning period continues now for a number of days. Does King Charles get to rest now and take some time out of the spotlight? Because I have to be honest, looking at him in the chapel today at Windsor, I was worried about him. I mean, he looked drawn, he looked exhausted, he looked emotional. He hasn't stopped, Phil. And it's important, isn't it, for the monarchy that he is able to refresh and recharge, because there are a very challenging few months ahead.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Dan. I thought he looked absolutely shattered, and I also thought the Queen Consort Camilla, I thought she looked a bit shaky as well. I thought she looked very, very tired. And you're absolutely right. I think they really do need to take a short break now and recharge their batteries, because they're taking on this massive task in their mid-70s, a task that the Queen took on when she was 25. So I think we've got to take one step back and realise that we're putting them through a hell of a lot here, and they haven't really had time to grieve, and they've been thrust into the limelight carrying out all these duties. So I think they do have to take time out, and I think they do have to rest before they start thinking about later in the year. And obviously next year we'll have royal tours. They'll want to go to places like Australia and Canada, and of course we've got to start planning for the coronation. But we need them to start pacing themselves. They've done a fantastic job over the last 12 days, but now they need to sort of pace themselves and have a sort of better programme.
Well, thank you so much to our esteemed royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier. You've been with us every day since the death of the Queen. Your insight has been absolutely invaluable, and of course we will check back with you very, very soon. Thank you so much. Now today, the royal family put on a united front, with Prince Harry walking in procession alongside his brother Prince William and sitting behind his father King Charles in Westminster Abbey. But behind the scenes, the period of mourning truce between the Sussexes and the royal family might already be wavering. Buckingham Palace has furiously hit back at reports that Harry was told of the late Queen's death just 5 minutes before the public announcement. The Daily Telegraph reported last night that the Duke of Sussex was the, quote, last to know about his grandmother's passing, and found out an hour after Prime Minister Liz Truss. Palace aides were angered by the, quote, disrespectful claims made on the eve of Her late Majesty's funeral. A spokesman for the King strongly rebuked the story, stressing the public was only informed after every family member had been informed. The Telegraph later amended its story to reflect the fact that Harry was not treated differently to other members of the family. He was reportedly told of the late Queen's passing as soon as he became contactable upon landing at Aberdeen Airport. But arguments like this will do nothing to bridge the gap between the royal family and the Sussexes, especially as it comes after the couple were uninvited from last night's state reception of the century at Buckingham Palace. Well, to get his expert analysis, I'm joined now by the renowned biographer Tom Bower, who has most recently authored a tell-all book about Meghan Markle. Tom, despite their unity and grief, the gulf between Harry and Meghan and the royal family, I hate to say it, Tom, but I don't think it's ever been greater, has it?
Well, I agree with you, absolutely. I thought that the body language of Harry throughout the day told volumes. I thought, especially as he got into the car after the service at St. George's in Windsor, he looked really quite angry. And perhaps I'm wrong, but I didn't see him singing gustily God Save the King inside Westminster Abbey either. I mean, Meghan has got a sort of a pastiche, plastic Hollywood smile permanently on. But Harry, in my view, was not hiding his anger. And these stories, whether it's about hearing late about the Queen's death, which I doubt, and being stripped of the ER on his uniform, and not being invited to an occasion where really he shouldn't be there. He represents absolutely nobody. He would only be there with Meghan to sow danger and dissent. All come from him. And of course, this is typical Harry and Meghan. It's all about them. In the week that we're mourning the death of the Queen, all we get from Harry and Meghan is why about me? Woe, 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 me and me. It's going to be very bad. And I don't think that Charles has got much time to sort this out. Unlike Phil, I think that he's got to hit the buttons pretty quickly as the new king. to sort out Harry and Meghan, to sort out Prince Andrew. Both of those men have got one major problem now, that with the Queen's departure, there is no one in court who's fighting for them. We've got to remember that the Queen purposely tried to include Harry in the Jubilee celebrations. She agreed to see them all when they were flying to Holland. There's nobody in the court now who wants to see Harry and Meghan. So they're going to leave Britain feeling pretty isolated.
And Tom, it just feels like it doesn't matter how many concessions King Charles and Prince William make to the Sussexes, they're never going to be happy. I mean, the briefing to the Sunday Times at the weekend suggested that Harry was actually so annoyed by this apparent slight over the military uniform, even though he wasn't even meant to be wearing military uniform in the first place, that they actually considered throwing a strop and wearing his morning suit. Now, he didn't in the end, but the most significant thing to me, Tom, is that you've got his side singing like a canary to a journalist in the middle of what is meant to be a mourning period focused on Queen Elizabeth II. So if they're doing that in the middle of the mourning period, it's going to get much worse, isn't it, as soon as they're back in Montecito?
Oh, absolutely. And I thought that the whole way in which the rest of the royal family treated Meghan and Harry today showed that they had very little sympathy towards them. And in return, Harry and Meghan looked as if they were quite angry that they weren't being treated with the respect they think they deserve. And I agree with you. They're going to go back to Montecito fuming. And the autobiography, will soon be dug out and released. I think what is interesting is, I would love to have known what Sophie Wessex said to Meghan as they drove in the limousine between Westminster and Westminster Hall and the church. Sophie Wessex is a plain-speaking woman. Did she tell Meghan exactly what they all thought of her? The idea that the body language between William and Harry showed reconciliation is, in my view, nonsense. How on earth can there be reconciliation when Harry and Meghan have said such terrible things about William and his wife? There's just no grounds for sympathy unless the two of them, the Sussexes, apologise. What I think will be telling is whether the king, the new king, makes their children prince and princess after all, whether he actually acknowledges their rights and titles, or whether he decides that he's going to cast them out. There's a lot for the king to do. He has now got to bring the court, his immediate royal family, into order. He's got to present the new monarchy. The old era is over. The new era now begins. There's no time to waste. He has now got to get to work to present the monarchy, the modern monarchy, the monarchy we all now have grown over the last week to love more than ever, to reassure us that it's going to be in good hands and we won't have to see Harry and Andrew parading in our streets ever again.
Tom, Meghan, someone who obviously you have spent the last couple of years reporting on, she was very emotional today at the service. Was she close to the Queen?
Well, was she emotional back then? I mean, when she allegedly touched a tear, or was it an act of a Hollywood actress thinking I better do a gesture to suggest a tear? The only person that Meghan, I think at the moment, is crying for is for herself. Certainly not for the Queen. After all, she had been pretty rude about her in the Oprah Winfrey interview. Whatever she might have said, the implication was pretty awful. Of course she wasn't close. And you remember from my book, I had this astonishing quote on the very morning of the Duke's of Edinburgh's funeral. The Queen said to a very close aide, "Thank goodness that Meghan's not coming." The Queen was a wonderful, wonderful agent of emollients, of trying to make good and settle arguments. But of course she had her passions. She could see through Meghan. She knew the damage that the Oprah Winfrey interview did. And she didn't want any grandstanding at Prince Philip's funeral. I thought Meghan today behaved properly. She didn't grandstand. She didn't try to attract attention. The sort of suggestion that she was wiping away a tear, I think it was just a scratch.
That is the renowned royal biographer Tom Bower, of course, the author of Revenge, the must-read bestseller about Meghan Markle. And Tom, thank you so much, and thank you for all of your contributions over what has been an incredible 12 days. We'll speak very soon. Tom Bower. Now, tonight, the Queen has been laid to rest alongside Prince Philip, her father, the Queen Mother, and her sister Princess Margaret at the King George VI Memorial Chapel in Windsor Castle. While this service was a private affair, the public earlier witnessed the instruments of state be removed from the Queen's coffin, symbolically ending her reign before Her late Majesty was lowered into the royal tomb below St George's Chapel during a televised committal service. Thousands had lined the long walk to say their goodbyes as the Queen arrived in the state hearse, while her beloved corgis, oh my goodness, this one got me, I have to admit, Mick and Fergus, bid their own fond farewells. Members of the armed forces paid tribute to, among them Andrew Lyons, a Royal Navy serviceman who took part in today's events. Here's what he told GB News earlier.
Yes, it is history, but you have to remember, this is our boss. Sorry, forgive me. Yeah, this is our boss. We're saying cheerio.
And what would your message be to Her Majesty?
We love you.
What a touching tribute. And joining me live now from Windsor Castle is GB News presenter Stephen Dixon, who has been covering the day's events as they have unfolded. And Stephen, a major development tonight, the royal family now confirming the Queen has been buried. What do we know, Stephen?
Well, we knew that private service was taking place down at 7:30 this evening in St George's Chapel, just behind me, and the Queen being laid to rest in the memorial chapel of George VI. Now, we know it was a very, very private affair, no cameras allowed, and just the immediate family of Her Majesty the Queen, and actually in what is a very small space. We're just sort of gathered within that space. It does go, part of that memorial chapel is underground, but we know that the space sort of accessible there with the members of the clergy would just be 4 members of the family. So we think that the children of Her Majesty the Queen were the 4 members of the family for that very final moment. And how fitting is that in many respects after what has been such a huge international event, and the various services that we've seen today, 2,000 at Westminster Abbey, 800 at St George's Chapel at 4 o'clock this afternoon, down to the very, very closest members of the Queen's family. And I think that signifies just how this has moved from being this very public grieving to a very, very private event, a family saying goodbye to their mother at the very, very end. And I think that's tremendously fitting. It reminds us, doesn't it, that Queen Elizabeth was a human being, not just a monarch, and that she was the matriarch of a family, just like any other. And I think it's really important that we remember that and show our respect, I would suggest, to the King and his siblings moving forward as they grieve their mother.
Beautiful broadcasting, as he has been doing all day. GB News presenter Stephen Dixon, and Stephen will check in with you very, very shortly. But we've seen over the last week that the American liberal media, from the New York Times to CNN, loves to paint a negative picture of the late Queen by linking her to all the so-called ills of the British Empire. However, a plethora of women across the UK, from the nation's top broadcasters to Hollywood royalty like Olivia Colman, are all praising the late monarch for her trailblazing reign. So with that in mind, has it been overlooked that Queen Elizabeth II was a social force for good as one of the ultimate feminists? Well, legendary former Women's Hour presenter Dame Jenny Murray writes for the Daily Mail that the late Queen did far more for women than the bra-binning feminists we see today. And I'm delighted to say that she joins me now. So, Dame Jenny Murray, Queen Elizabeth II, the ultimate feminist?
I don't think the Queen would have ever described herself as a feminist. You know, she never gave a view on any political issue, and that, of course, was a very political issue. But what I think we've forgotten is when my mother got married in 1949, and I was born a year later in 1950, she was a civil servant, and because she got married, she had to leave. They wouldn't employ a married woman. Once she married, she was expected to have a child and stay home and look after that child. The Queen, when she became Queen, was married, had 2 children, and of course went on to have 2 more, and just got on with the job. So what I believe is, just as an example to all of us, the Queen made a huge difference. I never discussed with her equal pay or sex discrimination or, you know, any of the laws that changed during the 20th century. But I know she was aware of it. When I saw her, when I went to Buckingham Palace to be made a dame, she said to me, "Oh, you know, Jenny, it's such a shame that Woman's Hour has moved from the afternoon to the morning. I can't listen to you nearly as often as I used to because I'm so busy in the morning." So I know she was very aware of all these political questions that women were grappling with throughout my, you know, I was born in 1950. She was there right the way through my life until today. And she was aware of what was going on. And she has actually made a real difference. You know, she changed the succession. So you didn't have to have an heir and a spare who was male. You can now have an heir and a spare who is female. You could even have an heir who is female, the first born to a monarch. Of course, we're a bit past that stage. That's not going to happen for quite a while. But she changed the rules of succession. She kept her own name. She insisted that she and her children should be Windsor. Prince Philip obviously was not too pleased about that. I think he said he was the only man in Britain who was not allowed to give his children his own name. But, you know, these examples, example after example after example, she was just there, doing a job, working really hard, bringing up her kids. And that was a tremendous influence on the way we women began to see ourselves. Also, on the divorce question, my first marriage, sadly, went really rather wrong towards the end of the 70s. And I wouldn't have dared tell my mother that I was thinking of getting a divorce. We both were thinking of getting a divorce. And then the Queen allowed Princess Margaret to have a divorce. And I then said to my mum, "Look, you know, Princess Margaret's getting a divorce. Brian and I are not too happy. We're thinking maybe of getting a divorce. How would you feel about that?" She said, "Oh, well, if Princess Margaret's done it and the Queen approves, that's OK." She had enormous influence.
She did. And Jenny, just one other point I wanted to touch on. Her service during World War II as a member of the Auxiliary Territorial Service. It's so often overlooked, but it's something that's very precious in my life because my grandma was also a member of the ATS. And you're right, they didn't view themselves as feminists because they joined the ATS. They viewed it as a necessary part of protecting our homeland from the threat of Nazi Germany and Adolf Hitler, but it was still incredibly significant, was it not?
It was incredibly significant. My mother wanted to join the WAF. My mother was exactly the same age as the Queen. Unfortunately, she died quite a long time ago. She wanted to join the WAF, you know, the Women's Air Force, and my grandmother wouldn't let her. My grandmother absolutely stamped her feet and said, "No, there's no way you're going to do that and be in uniform and behave like a man." But the Queen did it, even though her father, excuse me, her father had objected. And of course, she learned to drive and she became a mechanic. My mother learned to drive when I was 15, and only because I persuaded her it was essential for a woman to drive. And she said, well, I suppose the Queen does it, so maybe that's okay.
Indeed. Indeed. Oh, Jenny Murray, absolutely brilliant reflections. Dame Jenny Murray, I should say. Thank you so much, Jenny. We'll speak very soon.
Thank you.
Now, throughout the day, we've been glued to our TV screens to witness the unprecedented state funeral of the late Queen Elizabeth II. But what must it have been like to have actually attended inside Westminster Abbey? Well, former Prayer Book Society chairman Prudence Daly was awarded that very special honour, and I'm delighted that she joins me now to give her exclusive insight. Now, Prudence, just this year, you received an MBE in the Queen's Jubilee Honours for services to the Church of England. Now you've attended Her late Majesty's funeral. What was it like inside the Abbey today, Prudence?
I mean, it was an unbelievable honour to be there. You know, I couldn't believe it when I got the invitation. And of course, it was incredibly moving. I mean, I've never experienced anything like it. To be there with all those, well-known figures from politics in our country and heads of state from abroad, and all the members of the royal family all come to pay tribute to our remarkable Queen. But then to see the coffin coming past with the crown and the orb and sceptre on the top of the coffin, it really reminded me, it made me think of that coronation photograph that's so well known with the young Queen Elizabeth with the crown and the orb and sceptre. And it kind of framed her life, really. And it was, it was just incredibly moving. Obviously there were some very moving parts of the service. I think possibly one of the things that particularly made me dab my eyes was the hymn, Love Divine, All Love's Excelling. The last two lines are, till we cast our crowns before thee, lost in wonder, love and praise. And the Queen had obviously chosen that, and the idea of her finally getting to cast off her crown before God after having spent a whole life in duty and service. Yes, it was an unforgettable thing.
And Prudence, how important has faith been for the British public over the past 12 days?
Well, I think it clearly, I mean, I didn't have the stamina to go and stand in that incredible queue. But for people who did, it seemed to have been almost a religious experience. And I think that the Queen's faith, the Queen's own faith, about which we've heard more and more over the years, and which, it was certainly very manifest in the service all the way through. I think, at times like this, people need to hang on to something more than just the things of this world. And I think, the British public, by and large, is on average quite secular nowadays. But I think at times like this, the country becomes much less secular. And actually having that religious tradition to hang on to makes all the difference. And actually the service itself, one of the things that was striking about it as well is that it wasn't actually just about the life of the Queen. It was there was a strong emphasis on the life hereafter and where the Queen is going now that she's come to the end of her reign. I think that was very appropriate and very important.
Thank you so much to the former Prayer Book Society chairman Prudence Daly, who was there today inside Westminster Abbey at the state funeral of the Queen. Now, shortly after the Queen's death, it was suggested her love for Scotland saw her deliberately choose to die at her beloved Balmoral estate. Now, a new poll on Scottish independence appears to show that mutual admiration between Crown and nation is growing. Support for Scotland going alone from the UK has plummeted, actually, by 7 points since Her Majesty died on September the 8th. The exclusive Delta poll survey for The Sun on Sunday found that 42% of Scots would vote for independence if there was a referendum tomorrow, compared to one poll last month that found 49% would vote to leave. And in one of the most powerful moments of the Queen's goodbye today, it was a Scottish bagpiper who poignantly played for Her Majesty one last time as her coffin was gracefully lowered into the royal vault of St George's Chapel.
The late, most high, most mighty and most excellent monarch, Elizabeth II.
Neil Oliver, I mean, wow, what do you say to follow that? But it has been an incredible 12 days for our union, but it's been an incredible 12 days for Scotland too, hasn't it, Neil?
It has. I'm glad you played that moment. I think I would have said that in an endless parade of moving moments, that piper playing that lament while walking into shadow and disappearing. So I mean, the pipes sound like the keening anyway of a human voice.
Most high
and
most mighty.
When he receded into the darkness, it was as though a human soul was departing and would be heard from no more, and that was achieved by the potent magic of the pipes and a piper. Was unforgettable, and it underlines something quintessentially Scottish about, I suppose, the royal family and the lineage from which the Queen comes. And yes, I think because the Queen died in Balmoral, and that first part of the procession back to the events of today unfolded in Scotland, again underlined the Scottish connection. And I think for a long time there's been this a suggestion that the Union was in peril. But I would say that most Scots have always felt that the Union was strong, but that the Scottish National Party and Nicola Sturgeon had the microphone and were able to create an optical and an oral illusion that Scotland wanted this and Scotland wanted that. And what you saw over the last few days was that other part, that larger part of Scotland that has always been glad to be part of the Union. But they've been out of sight and haven't had the opportunity to raise their voice in saying that. And I think it was very potent. It's been potent throughout that Scottishness of the whole affair. And I think it's been an important part of all that has unfolded, and it underlines the enduring strength of the Union, I would say.
Well, indeed, because, Neil, if you look back, we've had 8 years, if you go back to the first independence referendum, or 6 years if you're talking about the Brexit referendum, where there's been a drumbeat in most of the mainstream media where we're almost meant to have an expectation that we are not proud of our union and that we should be ashamed to be British. And I feel like the past 12 days has blown that into smithereens, and that is a great tribute to the power of Her late Majesty the Queen.
Yes, I think also for me what is strong and what has been apparent is the British people. I think it has been an opportunity for the British people and for the so-called silent majority to come forward and be visible, and without speaking, to make their point. And I think that's something that will resonate. And obviously, it's impossible to make predictions about what any of events happening right now, what they might signal for the future. But there's no doubting that what we've seen has been a potent demonstration of something deep. And I think what it has underlined, the way in which events played out in Scotland and then the way in which events have played out this week, is that there is a British family, there is a British community, and there is a sense of togetherness. And for a while there, in fact, for years, there have been divisive and separatist voices that have hogged the microphone and had the better part of the spotlight. I think what we've been seeing quietly and in a very dignified and respectful demonstration is that other part, that lesser seen, lesser heard, but still dominant part of the British family, and it transcends the individuals. It transcends even the monarchy. You know, the monarchy represents us. The Queen or the monarch is the figurehead, but the sovereignty of the monarchy represents the sovereignty of the people. It's not Parliament, it's not any institution that is sovereign, it's the people. And this was an opportunity to see the people in their millions responding without instruction, without mandate, without being told what to do, just a natural, reflexive, human response. That's what we have seen, and it showed the Britishness, it showed the family of Britain, and I think that matters. It's impossible to know what that will mean in a week's time or in a month's time, but what you saw in a snapshot there were people just naturally and instinctively coming together to share an experience, and I think symbols and moments like that matter.
Neil Oliver, perfectly put. Thank you so much, Neil.
Thanks, Dan.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel, live at Buckingham Palace. For years, this was Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II's primary residence, but tonight, after a lifetime of service, she has returned home to forever rest at Windsor Castle. After a grand farewell to her public and the dignitaries who held her in such high esteem at her Westminster Abbey state funeral, and passing with the instruments of state she received almost 70 years ago on her coronation, symbolically ending her reign at a Windsor committal service, our fallen sovereign was tonight reunited with the family who have passed on, including her husband, Prince Philip, and remembered by those she leaves behind in a private service at the King George VI Memorial Chapel. I worried the passing of Queen Elizabeth the Great could leave Britain divided, but in death she has set up King Charles and his heir, the Prince of Wales, for the best possible success. Now it's over to them. My analysis and the thoughts of our US royal commentator Kinsey Schofield at 10:45. It was a devastating day all round for the royal family, so much emotion, including for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. But tensions appeared to bubble over, regardless. Prince Harry seeming reluctant to sing God Save the King amid public rows over his military uniform and the late notification of his grandmother's death. Has the royal truce already fractured? I'm going to get the thoughts of my superstar panel on this next. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, associate editor for the Daily Telegraph Christopher Hope, and political commentator Belinda de Lucy. That's before Angela Levin gives her take at 10:25. She's Prince Harry's biographer, of course. Plus, as over 140,000 people sign a petition to create Queen Elizabeth Day, backed by MPs and the Express newspaper, should there be a new annual bank holiday to mark Her Majesty's death? We'll debate at 10:30, and we'll take a look at tomorrow's historic newspaper front pages throughout the hour too. This is GB News, live on the day we bid a final farewell to Elizabeth II. Tonight, the late Queen has been laid to rest in the King George VI Memorial Chapel, reuniting in death with her husband Prince Philip, her father King George VI, the Queen Mother and her sister Princess Margaret. The private service at Windsor Castle followed a committal service at St George's Chapel and a grand state funeral at Westminster Abbey earlier in the day, attended by world leaders, including US President Joe Biden and France's Emmanuel Macron, and the next generation of royals, including the Prince and Princess of Wales' children, Prince George, just 9 and 7-year-old Princess Charlotte. Joining me now to discuss today's events is GBNews presenter Stephen Dixon, live from Windsor, and the royal biographer Angela Levin, who is here with me live at Buckingham Palace. So, Stephen, really significant. The royal family have confirmed tonight that Queen Elizabeth II is now officially buried. What do we know?
Well, just that, and the interesting part about all that, Dan, of course, is we get no detail about what has happened in that private service at 7:30 in St George's Chapel just behind me. And that's crucial to all this, I think, because it has been such a very public mourning process, the family having to grieve very much in public in the glare of the spotlight, which has been, we know, hugely difficult. Expected, it's what they knew they had to do. But nevertheless, I mean, it's been very obvious to see the strain, particularly on the face of King Charles. We saw it today as the national anthem was sung, both at Westminster Abbey and at the service at 4 o'clock here at St George's Chapel, and that you could really see the strain on his face. What they have been through over the past 12 days has been absolutely remarkable. That whistle-stop tour of the UK and having to deal with their own personal loss. And so tonight, at that private service at 7:30, private is the key word there. They finally get to say goodbye to their mother. And we know the Memorial Chapel of George VI is a very small space, actually, and so only the closest, the nearest and dearest of Her Majesty the Queen will have been there for that final goodbye, particularly, of course, her 4 children. And that's how it should be, I guess, shouldn't it? That they have this private moment that is theirs and theirs alone. Something we will never get the detail of, exactly what was said and exactly how they said their final goodbyes. And perhaps that means that they will also now get some time to mourn, to grieve alone, even if only just a couple of days, to recoup before the business of state begins again for King Charles. Something he's been, you know, in expectation of for such a long time. You know, he's been the world's longest apprenticeship, isn't it, for this job? And he knows he's got to get on with it now and follow in the footsteps of his mother, those great footsteps that she left. But that work now begins. But as we say, hopefully, after he's had a couple of days to really come to terms with his loss.
Stephen Dixon, our GBNews presenter at Windsor tonight, where Queen Elizabeth II has been buried. Let me come now to Angela Levin, live with me at Buckingham Palace. And Angela, it has been such an emotional day. We've seen the emotion etched on the faces of King Charles, Prince Andrew, Prince Edward and Princess Anne. They deserved this moment tonight, didn't they, Angela, away from the glare of the cameras, to grieve in private?
Yes, absolutely. I felt enormously sorry for them, that the long walk they had to do, and they did it so meticulously, and they were all in time. But you think when they've been up and worried about what's going to happen, how everything's going to work out, very, very difficult for them. And I think that, you know, they've been kept going for day after day after day, and they need really to let themselves unwind. I don't think they'll sleep very well for a few days. It holds you very tightly when something like this happens. But I think that slowly and gradually they need to sort of give themselves a bit of time and space. The problem is that King Charles is a workaholic, and that he finds it very, very difficult not to work, you know, all the hours that he can. And I think his wife needs to perhaps try and encourage him just to give himself a little break. But he's got so much to do, you see. He's waited for this moment, and there's so many things he wants to change and move on that it's very hard. But he's very stoic, and if he needs to escape, he's got at Highgrove, his summer home, he's got a tiny little house, and it looks sort of a gnome house, and he can go in there and he meditates and he thinks. It hasn't got electricity, it hasn't got running water, there is no key, because he doesn't carry keys, there's a special lock to turn around. He can go in there, and that's where he really does find peace, and he can revitalize himself there.
Thank you so much to our royal biographer Angela Levin, who will of course check in with very shortly about the latest in the royal rift, and to our GB News presenter Stephen Dixon, who has done sterling work all day for us live at Windsor. Much more to come, of course, including this row about royal titles for Archie and Lilibet. But before all of that, the latest news headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Dan, thank you. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. A state funeral was held this morning for Queen Elizabeth II. Tens of thousands lined the streets to pay their final respects. A Royal Navy gun carriage carried Her Majesty's coffin in a military procession from Westminster Hall to Westminster Abbey. On top sat the Imperial State Crown, along with a wreath of flowers and a card that read, "In loving and devoted memory, Charles R." The King and the Queen Consort led the procession, followed by the Prince and Princess of Wales and the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. A 2-minute silence was held across the nation. Tens of thousands more lined the route as the Queen's coffin was taken from London to Windsor Castle. The state hearse covered in flowers thrown by mourners for her final journey up the Long Walk. Her favourite horse and 2 of her beloved corgis there as the procession passed through the castle. Mourners spoke to GB News about why they decided to come and pay their respects.
She has been that continuous point throughout my service, 22 years in the engineers. We all swore an oath of allegiance to her, and that lasts forever. We only swore an oath of allegiance to one person. She swore an oath of allegiance to nations, and she has done a far, far better job of upholding that oath than I could ever hope to do.
We were all like one big family for the Queen, and it was really sweet of everyone to come together and to have, like, just to be all together as a community and to see this together.
A private burial service held for the Queen tonight marks the end of national mourning. Her Majesty has been buried together with the Duke of Edinburgh at the King George VI Memorial Chapel. It followed a committal service at St George's Chapel within the walls of Windsor Castle. During the service, the Imperial State Crown was removed from Her Majesty's coffin for the final time. The service ended with God Save the King and the Queen's Piper with one last lament for Her Majesty. This is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton.
I'm Dan Wootton, back live here at Buckingham Palace as we continue to pay tribute to Queen Elizabeth the Great. That's how I want to refer to her. Let's take a first look now at tomorrow's historic newspaper front pages. The Daily Express leads with an arresting image of those incredible pallbearers carrying the late Queen's coffin with the fitting yet simple headline, "God Rest Our Queen." The Eye, and I think this makes me sadder than anything else actually, declares that this is the end of the Elizabethan age. The Queen was buried at dusk next to her husband, sister and parents. Hundreds of thousands of people lined roadsides along the route from Westminster to Windsor. The Daily Star leads with a wonderful photo of the late Queen with her husband of 73 years, Prince Philip, noting that they are side by side together forever after being laid to rest in the King George VI Memorial Chapel. God bless the Queen, and God save the King, declares the Sun. We sent her victorious, they say. The Independent bids a final farewell as the royal family and the nation lay the Queen to rest. The Daily Mail splashes on an image taken from inside St George's Chapel before the Queen's coffin was lowered into the royal vault, Her Majesty's final journey. Let me bring my superstar panel back in now. The Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, the associate political editor at the Daily Telegraph, Christopher Hope, and the political campaigner Belinda de Lucy. Now, the division in the royal family was laid bare today as Princes Andrew and Harry both wore mourning suits during the procession of the late Queen's coffin at her state funeral. It must have been incredibly difficult for the pair to don civilian dress after they were banned from wearing military uniform due to their status as non-working royals. They were visibly emotional but were unable to salute either the coffin or the cenotaph when the procession passed the War Memorial in Westminster. Other senior royals, including King Charles, Prince William and Princess Anne, all in military uniform, saluted, while Prince Harry just nodded. The Duke of Sussex has worn civilian clothing at public events since the Queen died because he was stripped of his military titles in 2020 following Megxit, but he was in uniform as he stood vigil by her coffin on Saturday night following special dispensation from the King. However, Harry was reportedly left, quote, devastated when he discovered the Queen's ER initials were removed from the shoulder of his military uniform. Prince Andrew, on the other hand, was allowed to keep the royal cipher on his uniform for the vigil by the Queen's children the night before, a double standard that reportedly infuriated Harry. Now, the initials are traditionally only worn by those in service of the monarch, and so the absence of the cipher is thought to be down to dress regulations rather than a direct snub of the prince. This isn't the first time that Harry has worn military uniform in public without the cipher, by the way. In fact, for his wedding in May 2018, Harry wasn't wearing a cipher because he didn't actually become personal aide-de-camp of the Queen until October of that year, and so wasn't yet permitted to wear the initials. That honour was among the titles he resigned when he stepped down from royal duties to move to California with Meghan. So does this latest meltdown from Harry show that peace within the royal family is now futile, Carol Malone?
Oh, I don't think there was ever any hope of peace or a truce. I think it was never a possibility. And looking at Harry today, you know, I was quite shocked at the way he looked. I was shocked that while the rest of the royal family looked grief-stricken, he looked angry and petulant. And you know, okay, so he couldn't wear the cipher today. He did that to himself. That happened when he quit all his royal duties and handed back all his military appointments. He is no longer entitled to wear that. He was warned time and again by the Queen, by his father, by the rest of the family, that this is what would happen when he was no longer a working royal. He would not be entitled to the things in life as he had been. Now, and the fact that we're hearing today that he's devastated by not being allowed to wear the uniform in the second state, you know, does his devastation at not being allowed to wear what he wants to wear begin to compare to the devastation being felt by his father, by his auntie, by Princess Anne, by Edward, by Andrew? They are devastated at the loss of their mother. He is devastated at the loss of not being able to wear what he wants to. This is vanity on his part. You know, this is him moaning and whinging again and making what is probably one of the most important days of our history all about him. And I'd be very interested to see how he uses what has happened today, if he weaponizes it, if he monetizes it, if he goes back to America and starts whinging and moaning again. Because, you know, that will totally justify what we've been told, that maybe he was the last member of the royal family to be told about the Queen's death. If he was, I'm not surprised, because how could anyone trust both him and Meghan with private, sensitive information when we've seen previously what they have done with private information? You know, and do I think he will change? No, because the royal family and trashing it, frankly, are his and Meghan's income stream now. How is that going to change? We see by his face today, it is unlikely to change. He is as angry as he ever was.
I mean, Christopher Hope, I have to admit, it has shocked me that he has continued, or his friends have continued to brief the media during this official mourning period.
We don't know who these friends are, but I agree with Carol. I'm worried about the ammo he may have stored up for his trip back to Montecito. We're looking at the fact that they held hands in Westminster Hall when no one else did. He lost the ER, the cipher, as you describe in there, Dan, because he's no longer an aide de camp to the Queen, because he resigned that when he decided to leave public service. The mourning coat, the fact he couldn't salute. All these things will be our weapons for the next Oprah interview if he wants to do that. And I really would hope that he doesn't. I hope that he can try and find a way back to build back better. Let's use those terms, shall we? With the king of the UK, with his dad, and not go back and harbour these grudges. I just don't think that he's got a wife who, it seems to me, makes it worse. Just doesn't seem to. I think in the sense that King Charles has got a Queen Consort Camilla, who most of us think it looks like he brings out the best in him. Whenever Charles might get a bit petulant about a pen or something else, Camilla steps in as I said, "Stop! You don't be a wally, Charles. Get on with it." And I think that's what Harry needs: someone who can not play to this thing that he's being picked on by the rest of the family and by the country at large. That isn't the case. It wasn't the case when he married Meghan. I do hope they can try and get back together. I mean, the Queen has done a very, very best here, and let's hope that in terms of uniting the country, and let's hope that they can find inspiration in that.
I mean, look, Belinda de Lucy, Meghan looked very upset today, and Harry, as Carol said, looked almost angry. And I do completely appreciate that they are grieving, but the problem that I have, Belinda, is that they've still been playing these media games over the past 12 days, and we're not meant to be playing media games during the official mourning period.
I worry, though, we're beginning to see slights in everything. I think Harry is seeing a slight in absolutely every move the royals make over the last 12 days. He's probably interpreted everything they've done as some kind of slight because he's wound himself up so much. I do think grieving makes you extra prickly, extra defensive. So, you know, if he's looking angry or upset, I think maybe he's also facing the consequences of his actions, which is actually very humiliating for him. The hiding away in America has protected him from facing responsibility for the bad decision he's made. And when he dictated to the Queen, "I want to cherry pick what royal work I do," this has really come back and bitten him now, and it's very public for him. So I think he's going through humiliation as well, self-inflicted, which is hard for him to interpret and know what to do with. So he may then in turn blame William, but actually he's only got himself to blame. And bear in mind, Dan, he talks about his mental health all the time. I don't think Harry's taken 1 minute to consider the sort of mental health issues he has put on the royal family over the last 2 years since Prince Philip was ill. And I think, unfortunately, I think it's just a broken man, a damaged man. I don't think he's bad. I think he's grieving. I think he's angry. But there's no sign of reconciliation, and you can't force it. You just have to let it play out.
How dare he be devastated about his choice of clothing today, of all days? Be devastated tomorrow. Be devastated next week. Not today. Today belongs to Her Majesty, not to any petty squabbles he may or may not have with the royal family.
I agree. I felt that the just watching Harry and Meghan when they walked into the Westminster Hall when the Queen was lying in state, I think the majesty of that experience, the size of the monarchy, just really put them back into a kind of. It made them look very small. I thought they kind of battle with Meghan and Harry. It seemed like, well, this is obviously ridiculous because the Queen's died and she is so important to all of us. And we are, I mean, it's a good soap opera, Dan, but maybe I think that the hope is that we can put the Meghan-Harry show into a degree of context next to the importance of King Charles's reign and why it matters to us all.
And I actually wonder whether Meghan was sitting there thinking, gosh, this is quite a lot I've lost, because this could all be very much part of my life. And now I have to go back to America where I just sort of stand and do speeches. But Meghan doesn't owe us anything, I don't think. She wasn't part of the royal family to begin with, so I'm not too bothered about her behaviour as I am with Harry.
Maybe Harry felt that too, you know. I mean, I was watching him today thinking, how could you not want to
be part of this?
To this? How could you not want to be part
yes,
of it?
I think...
And I think you're totally right that he was humiliated, embarrassed, and he's realised that in all of this, he's insignificant.
Yeah.
You know, the most important person was buried today. And
the point is,
the king
this
and the
was
rest
a
of the family
choice
are
that
involved.
they made, and they were warned for such a long time. This was going to be the consequence if they went forward with Megxit, and that is what they now have to deal with. Absolutely fascinating discussion. Thank you so much, Carol Malone, Christopher Hope, and Belinda Lucy. Do stand by. Since last Wednesday, though, thousands of mourners flocked to London to join the queue to see the Queen line in state, or the Great Elizabeth line, as I dubbed it. This extraordinary display of patriotism and respect to our late monarch that stretched for 7 miles along the River Thames was truly the best of British. The queue finally closed last night, and former RAF veteran Chrissy Hesse will forever be etched in history as the last person to see the Queen's coffin lying in state. Incredibly, this was Chrissy's second time in the queue. So this is what she had to say about her experience.
So it's amazing going round once, but then being given the honour and privilege to be able to go round again was just amazing. It gave me time to reflect and take in everything that was going on. She stood for all of the military and various other organisations, and I said my allegiance to her when I joined the RAF, and she was just an amazing lady. She inspired a lot of women.
But it wasn't just members of the public who did their bit for the Queen. Some well-known household names chipped in as well. Former Home Secretary Priti Patel volunteered as a marshal for those queuing to pay their respects to the Queen. Well, at least some MPs didn't skip the queue. And today, I love the City of London police officer and wife of Rod Stewart, great woman. She's a really good woman. Penny Lancaster was spotted shuffling through the crowds gathered in the Mall to see the Queen's funeral. She was on patrol, assisting with the huge police operation taking place across the capital. Good on them both. As we were just discussing, the Queen's death has unified Harry, Meghan and the royal family in shared grief over recent days, despite clear differences in how working and non-working royals have been involved in proceedings. Today, the Duchess of Sussex appeared to shed a tear during Her Majesty's funeral as she walked just yards behind the Princess of Wales, a scenario we couldn't possibly have imagined even just a few weeks ago. But is the public truce over a period of mourning already starting to falter? Television footage from inside Westminster Abbey seemingly showed Prince Harry declining to sing God Save the King during this afternoon's funeral. Angela Levin is with me now, and Angela has met Prince Harry many times. She even wrote his autobiography, so you do know the man, Angela Levin. And look, a lot of people, quite rightly, I think, want to say, look, maybe this just was a mistaken moment. But it was odd to me, Angela, I'm not going to lie, because I saw Prince Harry at times belting out the hymns. And then that moment when the cameras were awkwardly on him as God Save the King came to a conclusion, and he didn't seem to be moving his mouth, Angela. You know, are we being too harsh on him to have this discussion?
I don't think we're being harsh enough, actually. No, it was appalling behaviour, wasn't it?
Do you think it was a choice?
Well, of course, you know, he's not that stupid. Of course it's a choice. He just couldn't bring himself to do it, or he didn't want to. But he would know that the cameras would be around and there, and that would be
You're
the
filmed
impression.
at all times. You're filmed at all times in there.
Of course. So he'd had experience of that, so he would know. So if he didn't want it, you know, he could have just said it without singing, you know, just mouthed it if he didn't really want to. But he didn't. He kept his mouth shut. And it was obvious that he wasn't going to be pushed like that. But I
So
just
is
think
he
they've
sending
got...
a message, do you think?
No, I think he was just very angry, and he just kept going with that anger. I don't think he actually sent a message, because the message reverberates against him. I mean, he's the one who is behaving badly. You don't start doing those sort of tricks actually in such an important occasion in a cathedral.
And
it's
also,
ridiculous.
Also, he just needs to support his grieving father. If not, like, here's my issue, Angela. If he's not going to support King Charles today, on the day that he buries his mother, when is he ever going to support King Charles?
Well, he won't, you see. I mean, he's got it in his head that he's stuck and he's trapped, and he's very unkind about him. And the poor king is very shocked, because he loves him. And you can love, as a parent, you can love your child but not love what they're doing. So I think that's the problem. And he just couldn't care. You see, it's all about him, it's all about them, it's me, me, me. And actually, it wasn't about them at all. It was about a wonderful queen. And the man, the people she's left behind. It doesn't. I don't think it crosses their mind. I think now they've got sort of a blackout that it's only about them, and they seem to look for things that aren't quite right. I've been absolutely astonished that in these few days, which are so important, and we know we're all focused on this extraordinary woman who looked after us for 70 years, that they could actually pick tiny little details and then get someone to say something about it, like he didn't have the ciphers, and that he was told late, and you know that he's very unhappy about it. It's nothing to, you know, it's not the time and the place. You have to keep quiet. It's just basically good manners, and actually they're not showing good manners. And in any case, half the things he complains about are not necessarily true. I mean, it's Meghan's truth, really, which we've come to sort of doubt. And I just don't know how you can try and take the attention away from your father, who is grieving, your aunt who's grieving, your uncle who's grieving, your sisters-in-law and your brother, actually, and think that you're the only person that counts then. It's all got to be done round you. It's just not on.
Well, I was absolutely shocked that they decided to brief the Sunday Times at the weekend. Now, look, we don't know if it was Harry personally, Meghan personally, people working for them, that odd little bloke home in Scobie. We don't know who it was. But the point is, Angela, it was someone close to them, because no one else would have known that when Harry got his uniform out of its delivery case and realised that the cipher wasn't there, he was so incandescent with rage, he even considered turning up in a mourning suit. That is very specific information. It's highly inappropriate to be briefing this sort of thing during the mourning period, especially, Angela, by the way, given he released a statement right at the start of the mourning period saying that he was going to wear a mourning suit happily during all of the proceedings. So that clearly wasn't true.
But when he got married, he didn't have the no manners. So what is that all about?
Well, he didn't have he didn't have the role then, did he? And this is, I think this is the problem, Angela. They want to do this half in, half out thing. They still think that that's an option, and the Queen always made it clear, the late Queen, sorry, always made it clear that you can't be a half in, half out royal. You're either in or you're out, and they chose to be out, and this is the consequence.
The main thing is that they want to use their royal identity to have commercial gain. So it's even worse than half in, half out. It's to use it to sell themselves and earn
Which
lots
was
of
always
money.
the fear of the late
that's
Queen.
what they've done. I mean, he did say to the Queen that he wouldn't do that. It's one of the things he said he would keep away from, but he hasn't. So I think that it's a very sad state. They seem to bring out the worst in each other, I'm afraid. And I think that the rudeness is just impossible to understand.
The problem is, if they're already unhappy over this period, when I actually think... See, I think what shocks me so much is that I think Charles and William provided them so many concessions. Yeah. You know, William agreed to do the walkabout so that they were united outside of Windsor Castle on that Saturday. Charles allowed him to wear the uniform for the vigil because he didn't have to allow that. And Meghan was put in the best car with Sophie Wessex to take her from Buckingham Palace behind us to Westminster Hall. You know, there have been so many concessions made. Even the seating plan, by the way, Charles made sure today in Westminster Abbey, Harry was immediately behind him, so he couldn't be accused of there being some sort of snub. And it's just never enough, isn't it? It's never enough for them.
It is never enough, and it will never be enough. But I think the other thing was that which didn't happen, was that there was a notification by the little Omid.
That odd little guy.
saying that he was going to this very important dinner where all the great and the good from all around the world
last
were
night
going.
here,
Yes.
the state reception.
And then they took it away. But in fact, the Buckingham Palace have said that they were never invited. They were never going to be invited because they weren't working royals. So it's not just what they see. They change the narrative so that it looks much worse than it is. So people take these accusations as true, when actually half of them aren't, or maybe more than half of them aren't.
It's media manipulation.
I feel very sorry for both of them because they're looking for all the worst things and they've just got their shackles up and they just want to create nastiness.
I know, and it's so sad because I think what would have been so lovely is for them to return this week. And I know they didn't mean to be here. It's a complete coincidence that they were in the country at the time the Queen died. But my God, Angela, this was an opportunity handed to them on a platter to reunite with their family. And what's so sad is that by all accounts, and from everything that I'm told, there hasn't really been any real reunion. There's been no private moments of sort of making up.
Well, when you saw them together, there was a big gap. They weren't close where they could just whisper and have a little chat. There's a big gap between them as they walked along. And I think that there's no chance. Because Harry doesn't want to go backwards because he'll feel he's lost and he hasn't got what he wanted, which is to be more powerful and to sort of crush the current royal family in order to do it as an alternative.
Just as a final note, Angela, I think his task, or their task, if that indeed is their task, if that is what they want to do, it's been made more difficult this week, hasn't it?
Oh, completely. Because actually everybody has been able to see the effort that the King has made to make him feel comfortable, feel part of it, is in the correct position, number 5 in the order. And if he comes out with his book, if Meghan comes out with her podcasts, and she's going to do a book, she says she's free to say whatever she likes, whereas she said when she was in the palace that everybody silenced her. But if they do that, people are going to be really fed up because, as we said today, that the emotion there, the love there from all around the world was absolutely astonishing, overwhelming. So if somebody's just being petty and complaining about every little thing, people are bored with it. They've had enough already.
What I saw this week is I saw Charles and William put a lot of personal hurt, because they're very angry, by the way. They're very angry because of the fact that they've attacked their wives. That's what they find unforgivable.
Protecting their wives.
Well, they are, because Meghan attacked Kate, and William is furious because he knows Kate can't respond over the whole bridesmaid, did they cry or not, fitting story. And Harry has planned at least to attack Camilla in his book. We don't know if that will remain, and but also the fact that he didn't even issue any form of public congratulations to Camilla on the news that she was going to become Queen Consort. It was very telling, and so they're defensive of their wives, but they were prepared to put that to one side. And I think Charles and William this week, and you know, I've been critical especially of Charles in recent months, but I think they were magnanimous this week. I think they did the right thing, and unfortunately it doesn't look like Harry and Meghan are going to repay them, and that is a great shame.
Yeah, they did the right thing when they were feeling terrible and in anguish about the losing the Queen. So it's not just they tried to do it in normal situation, they tried to overcome a huge mountain of emotion to do that. And if they're not interested, well, I think you just have to let them go. But they can't have it both ways. They absolutely can't. They will fight us, and they will try and have their own woke royal family as an alternative.
Yeah, it's a horrible
thought. But I think people will get very, very fed up with it because they've had enough.
Well, Angela Levin, look, thank you so much for being part of our coverage these past 12 days. Your insight has been utterly fascinating. Of course, you have this brilliant position of being Prince Harry's biographer. You've got your biography of Camilla coming up as well. So you're perfectly positioned, and it has just been such a privilege and an honour to have you by my side over the past 12 days.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela Levin. We'll see you very soon. Take a little break. Let's take a look now at more of tomorrow's historic newspaper front pages. Go forth upon thy journey, says the Times, as the Queen is laid to rest at Windsor with tens of thousands lining the street for her funeral. The Daily Telegraph remarks on an outpouring of love from around the world with a moving photo of a solemn King Charles III at today's committal service. The Daily Mirror bids goodbye until we meet again and runs that heartbreaking photo of the Queen's corgis bidding a fond farewell at Windsor. The Guardian too leads with the final farewell and comments on the majestical funeral pomp as Queen Elizabeth II is laid to rest. The Daily Express columnist Carol Malone joins me now alongside the associate political editor at the Daily Telegraph, Christopher Hope, and the political campaigner Belinda de Lucy. They are my superstar panel on this historic evening. Now, after bidding an emotional farewell to the late Queen, the nation is looking for ways to commemorate our longest reigning monarch. One suggestion is to create Queen Elizabeth Day, a new annual bank holiday to mark Her late Majesty's passing. Over 140,000 have already signed a petition, and the move has received support from MPs from the left and right, including former Tory leader Ian Duncan-Smith and Defence Committee Chair Tobias Ellwood, as well as the historian Dan Snow and the Daily Express newspaper. The campaign points out there are normally only 8 public holidays a year in England and Wales, compared to 13 in Germany, 12 in Italy and 11 in France, and perhaps we should catch up to our European neighbours. However, with a looming cost of lockdown crisis and the economy on a knife edge, is another day off work, especially when we were granted 2 extra this year for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee and now her funeral, the most responsible way to honour Her late Majesty. Now, I'm not sure about this, Carol, because I think our work ethic is better than those European countries that I just spoke to. But your newspaper, the Daily Express, is leading the charge for Queen Elizabeth II Day.
It's a brilliant idea. You know, I know as a country we're always asking for bank holidays for all sorts of stuff, but this is something really important. Elizabeth is arguably, I can't say it, our greatest ever monarch, and what better way to commemorate her memory is with Elizabeth's Day. And it's not just about her memory, but it is a chance for us to educate our children about the kind of queen that she was. And also, I mean, I think on top of all of this, on top of the bank holiday, we should top that off with a statue in Trafalgar Square as well. And there's been much talk about that. There are lots of MPs behind that. Our paper's pushing for that too. There's talk of her on her favourite horse in the square on the 4th plinth, and I think that's a great idea too, because as Dan Snow said, it is about it's a to mark our history. It's about our history. And while and on that day, if it is a bank holiday, it means that communities can come together, there can be street parties, we can celebrate her. And that's what she did in life. She brought people and communities together. So let us make sure that she does that in death.
No, no.
What do you mean, no, no? What do you mean, no, no?
Well,
Christopher Hope, you're not keen.
Well, Dan, I'm going to give you some numbers. Sorry to be boring about this. 1.36 billion is the cost of having a bank holiday. Although that's a government estimate, maybe 837 million, according to PwC back in May. Now, if I may humbly suggest, we are a seafaring nation. It's time we put a follow-up to the Royal Yacht Britannia, Dan. That's the answer. It's called the Royal Yacht Elizabeth, currently priced around £250 million. You can buy 4 of them for the price of your
How does that
bank
involve
holiday.
The people of this country?
And therefore, we'll get a chance to look at it, go on it.
No, we
it.
won't get a
Can
chance
I give you,
to go on it.
My turn, Carol. The single most biggest, most popular tourist attraction in Scotland is, guess what? The Royal Yacht Britannia. We love it. We love ships. We love yachts. It's very important that the country gets behind it, including all of GB News.
Scrooge.
I'm with Carol on this one for the main reason
Let me see who you're backing. OK, Carol.
One of the reasons I think we're all feeling a little bit uneasy about what happens now is the Queen acted as the buffer to this kind of crazy, progressive, modern train that we keep being hit by. We want to hang on to tradition, to culture, to our nation state, to our history, to stiff upper lip, to courage. And the only way we can keep her memory alive like that for generations who never knew her is to have this wonderful day of celebration every year. And I get it about the economy. So how about this? We give it a couple of years while we help to improve our own economy now. And in time, whether it's 2 or 5 years, we then introduce the bank holiday for Her Majesty then. And why not include pubs? Make it a fantastic Queen pub quiz that evening. Make it a nation... street parties. Let's go for it. If you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. Let's do it all in.
He's a grizzly bear. We're not interested. We don't care.
You're missing the vision here.
No, we're not missing the vision.
Yes,
You're talking
are.
about a vision of a yacht that none of us will ever step onto.
What about
we might be able to look at it, but we won't.
I mean,
ever be on it.
Chris, I know it is your absolute passion project, but is it realistic in the middle of a cost of lockdown crisis that any Tory government would approve the funding for a new royal yacht? I just wonder if the idea is dead for the moment, Chris.
The last royal yacht was commissioned by both Labour and the Tory governments back in the late 40s. There's no reason why you can't do it. We would benefit the government through trade. The last royal yacht had various trade events, trade days they called them, in the mid-90s, generating hundreds of millions of pounds of contracts by bringing CEOs and chairmen and their wives or partners onto the yacht where they see where the Queen lived.
Why did they shelve it?
They shelved it because John Major wouldn't recommission it in 1994 because
it didn't look good.
Because the cost of the fuel was too expensive.
Yeah.
And when John Major came around to say he would do it in 97, it was too late. And Tony Blair axed it in October 97, and we've been lamenting it ever since. I'm one of the people, Dan, and you're probably a bit younger than me, but I stood on the shore in Liverpool and waved at the Royal Yacht on her final voyage around the British Isles. Millions turned out, pre-Twitter, before anyone filmed it. There was a lot of love for this yacht. It's there, it's latent. Let's reawaken it, Dan.
Well, look, it was one of the few opportunities in public that the Queen took to shed a tear over the course of her life, so we know how much it means to her. For me, I just think we've got to quickly get that 4th plinth in Trafalgar Square. You know, it's had all sorts of things up over the past few months. That's got to be the Queen.
I'll say one thing about the 4th plinth. Yeah, great idea by Carol's to put the Queen on her famous Burmese horse, a favourite Burmese horse. Why not have the Duke of Edinburgh with the Queen on that? I think because
you're such an old romantic.
I think the Duke of Edinburgh was her strength and stay. We know that. They were bound together in this great love story. They ran the country as head of state and partner of the head of state. Let's give them both the 4th plinth.
Yeah,
agreed.
It's a good idea. At last you said something sensible.
Love that idea. OK, let's end for now on a note of agreement, for now at least. Carol Malone, Christopher Hopeland and Lucy do stand by, though. But heads of state from all corners of the world arrived at Westminster Abbey today to pay their respects to the late Queen Elizabeth II. But the sheer volume of world leaders did have some broadcasters a bit muddled, including Australian Channel 9 presenters Peter Overton and Tracy Grimshaw. This is hilarious. Watch.
Who's this?
No, hard to identify. Maybe minor royals, members of the... I can't identify them at this point.
We can't spot everyone, unfortunately. They look like they could well be local dignitaries. It's hard to see. We're looking at the backs of their heads mostly.
But I think we are now getting to the pointy end, as they say, of the... I'm just told that was Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister, in the distance that we could see hopping out of that car. Well, thank you very much.
Goodness me. She's not a minor royal. It's our Prime Minister. Elsewhere, down under, Australian Senator Holly Hughes has sparked controversy on the last day of the late Queen's state funeral after this very personal dig about Harry and Meghan. Watch.
I'm sick of both of them. I sort of long for the day where I hope Harry rolls over one day, takes one look and thinks, what have I done? And comes to his senses and packs up and moves back across the pond. I think he's made an awful error. And I think she's... I think she's had a terrible influence over him, and she's just a horrible human, it's absolutely disgraceful. And I don't know what's happening with the book that he's done. Her podcasts, apparently they're going through them now, trying to take out parts where she said not particularly kind things about the Queen. It's just, they're awful, revolting people, and I think absolutely they shouldn't be invited to this, and I hope they're not invited to a lot of other things.
The Aussie politicians don't hold back, do they? Now, as we bid our final farewell to our beloved Queen, we're asking you to send in your condolences, fond memories and experiences of the Queen and your thoughts on our new King. I've loved them, by the way, over the past 12 days, so let's share some more. Jules on email says, I queued for nearly 9 hours yesterday before entering Westminster Hall to see the Queen lie in state. Inside, there was a serene and ethereal atmosphere, and I'm so pleased to have been there. I made some special friends in the queue and saw everyone of all ages. Some people were pushing elderly relatives in wheelchairs, some older people with disabilities on crutches queued all the way. It was a truly humbling experience. Good on you. I mean, it's the Elizabeth line, the great Elizabeth line. I'll never forget it. Nikki emails with comments on Prince Andrew. She writes, Jesus said, judge not that ye be not judged. If the Queen could forgive so many ghastly humans, can't we just let this issue rest as she so often did? Can't we honour her love for Andrew and stop trying to shame him as though we are somehow paragons of virtue? And from Joanne, also on the email, the most moving moment for me today was when the national anthem was sung and King Charles struggled to hold back the tears. I thought he was going to break down. It was very moving and made me proud to be British. Thank you so much. Do keep your thoughts coming in. You can always contact me, you know that. Dan at gbnews.uk and at gbnews on Twitter. And we've had 6 years of national acrimony, but today's spine-tingling funeral of Elizabeth the Great was truly the best of British, a country united in respect and grief. For a long time, I worried the death of our Queen could leave Britain even more divided. But what's become clear to me is that Her late Majesty has provided the new King and his heir with the biggest stage and the best ever opportunity to protect the monarchy for another century. As I wrote in my latest Mail Online column tonight, of course, while the late Queen has given him the best possible launchpad, the challenges facing King Charles are immense. The disgraced Prince Andrew and self-exiled Prince Harry, who both marched in procession and mourning suit today despite having served in the Falklands and Afghanistan respectively, provide the biggest imminent threat. Charles will have to convince his younger brother to slip away into obscurity without a fuss, something the Duke of York is unlikely to want to do. As for Harry and Meghan, the media briefing campaign launched during the mourning period suggests they will certainly not be going quietly. But I'm joined now by Kinsey Schofield, our star US royal commentator, who joins me live here at Buckingham Palace. And Kinsey, I know that there are these challenges to come for King Charles.
But I do think that the monarchy has actually emerged from this period so much stronger than I would have believed even just 12 days ago. I mean, I was incredibly worried about what the death of the Queen would mean for the way that the public, both here and around the world, would react to the monarchy. In fact, I think the monarchy has come out stronger.
Oh, I could not agree with you more. What a beautiful representation of your country today. It was almost like the most significant, sophisticated tourism ad. All I want to do is stay here for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
It was so beautiful, the tradition. You respect your elders. You respect the monarchy. You respect you respect your leadership, and that's something that the entire world is lacking right now. So to see that today, it warms your heart. It makes you, I mean, I don't live here, but I was very proud to be here today. And I think it was a great representation of the monarchy, and I think it is a great representation of what is to come.
Yeah, I completely agree. So it's almost as if King Charles has been given this incredible opportunity by his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be wrong, Kinsey, I think he's done incredibly this week, and I say that because I'm always honest. I'm honest about my views.
He is.
I have been a critic. I have been a critic, you know. I hold my hands up. But he's convinced me this week to, at the very least, I know not all of you agree, because there are lots of controversial things with King Charles politically, the extreme eco agenda, the connection to the World Economic Forum, all of that, and of course we will keep on that. But Kinsey, he has given me the will to give him a chance. I'm willing him to succeed. I'm willing him to do the right thing now. And I really feel like the British public are very unified in that.
I've only heard one person say opposite of what you just said, and that was a very big Diana supporter. And I think that, yes, he's going to have issues navigating that because those people still exist. But what we saw today and what we've seen over the last week is a man willing to sacrifice ego for his family and for the brand. And we've seen somebody that actually, quite frankly, has a very soft heart. I mean, how many times did you water up watching him struggle throughout the day to, deal with the fact that he's lost his mother? And you could see it in his eyes. He was saying, we're finally here. I can't believe we're here. And, you could see that emotion in his face. And I think I trust a man like that. And I think that I'm looking forward to seeing what he accomplishes. But you're exactly right. The politics concerns me.
Yeah, he's got to stay out of that. I mean, look, and he's very different to his mum, Kinsey. We've always known that. We have seen all sorts of emotion from him this week. I mean, we wouldn't have seen the late Queen hugging and kissing members of the public in the way that he did. We also wouldn't have seen his late mum explode over a pen a couple of times.
Did you see him laugh about that afterwards?
Yeah,
How
totally,
great was that?
Totally. And that's the thing. He's never going to be a carbon copy of his mother. That's impossible. I genuinely believe she's our greatest ever monarch. He has to do his own thing.
Yeah.
And I actually feel like we've got a window this week into the sort of monarchy that we're going to see from Charles. It's going to be more honest. It's going to be up close and personal. It is going to be more emotional. It is going to be more in touch because he's a different generation. He's a baby boomer.
Isn't that exciting? I mean, isn't that exciting
I think
to
it
think
is.
about that? I mean, one of the reasons we admired the Queen so much was because we didn't hear from her a lot.
Yeah.
But Charles is a completely different man. He'll sit down and do interviews. He pokes fun at himself. I've seen him poke fun at, talking to plants. So I do think that we have something to look forward to this. He's going to reveal a little bit more, give us a little more access without ruining the mystery.
Yeah. Just finally, Kinsey, though, a big burden is now placed on the Prince and Princess of Wales and their family.
Mm-hmm.
They are so determined to protect little George and Charlotte and Louis, and I have huge respect for that.
Yes.
Because, of course, they're still incredibly young. But I really do believe, Kinsey, it was the right decision today to let the 9-year-old, to let the 7-year-old be at this funeral. They behaved impeccably, and it gave the world an opportunity to see the family that may well lead the monarchy into the 22nd century.
And watching Catherine comfort her children, and I don't know if you saw this, but throughout the ceremony, Prince William would engage with Prince George, I could have not fallen harder in love with this family as a whole. I mean, I was done with Louis. Jubilee, I was ready to adopt the entire clan. But
I actually wish Louis had been there.
I know.
The little royal tearaway, but maybe not appropriate for a funeral, I guess. And he's only
understand.
5. He's only 5.
But yes, no, you're absolutely right. The Prince and Princess of Wales are the future, and that future looks bright.
Yeah, it does, but also a lot of pressure on them. We have to acknowledge that.
Yes.
Kinsey Schofield, look, it's been wonderful having you part of our coverage. Thank you so much, Kinsey. And of course, we'll keep talking to you as the weeks develop, because I'm sure there'll be a lot going on back in California when a certain couple get back there, Kinsey Schofield. So thank you so much. But I want to turn back now to my superstar panel, the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, the Daily Telegraph's associate editor Christopher Hope, and the former political campaigner Belinda de Lucy for a final thought on what has not just been, Carol Malone, an incredible 24 hours. I mean, the last 12 days, how do you comprehend what we've all just lived through?
You don't, you know, you feel it. You don't have to understand it. We just felt it. And I didn't dream for 1 minute that the country would unite in the way it has. And for me, that's what this has all been about. You know, the Queen, never forget, was the ultimate patriot. I didn't know what patriotism was about properly until this week. I thought it was about allegiance and love for a country. I realised it's allegiance and love for one person at the heart of all of this. It's her. But, you know, her legacy is pride, it's unification. It's actually, and she showed us through that funeral today, the funeral that she helped to arrange, that the monarchy is about our history, our traditions. It's about the glory of nations. And today showed us they will all endure.
And Christopher Hope, look, tomorrow we are going to be plunged back into politics, and it's business as usual. You know, from tomorrow at 9 o'clock on this show, it is business as usual, as it should be. However, Chris, hasn't this just been some blessed relief? This unity has just been so powerful.
Absolutely. We'll get a blizzard of information down this week on health spending, on tax at the end of the week, on national insurance and the rest of it. But as of tonight, let's think about her public service. Let's think about a monarch who kept going for 4 days trying to give power to a new Prime Minister in Liz Truss, someone who went to Scotland for her final days, meant that she died there and united the Union more than it's ever been. I can't think it's been felt this united as a UK for years and years and years, and that goes down to the wish and the desire of our late Queen to be a public servant to the very end, and that is the absolute best you can say about her.
Belinda de Lucy, final word to you.
I would just say it feels like the past 12 days we've all been those blue avatars connecting our tails into the tree of life and unity, and I don't want it to break. I want to keep this continuity and connection. It's been incredibly healthy for our souls and the fabric of our nation.
Absolutely.
Well, look, it is the Carol Malone, Christopher Hope, Belinda de Lucy, thank you. It is the end of a heartbreaking period for the country and the end of an era. But I thank you because today we showed Queen Elizabeth II just how much she meant to us one last time with a send-off for the history books. Thank you for being with me since we first got the news we all dreaded, and have since reflected on the remarkable life of the late Queen and celebrated the incredible legacy she leaves behind. I'm back at 9 p.m. tomorrow as we slowly adjust to a world without Elizabeth the Great. And thank you, Your Majesty, for your service. Good night.
Yeah.